Hello, everyone. Today we are going to continue our study in end times, and we are now coming to the last 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation. We're just going to look at some things. Remember, I remind you every week, answers in a nutshell, not an exhaustive verse-by-verse study, but hopefully is giving us all an idea of the timeline and who the characters are in these last 7 years of the tribulation. So before we enter these last 3.5 years and talk about some things and give some meaning to some of the names like Gog and Magog and Meshach and Tubal and Armageddon, before we get into all that, I want to just continue on a thought of last week. We were talking about the false prophet comes on the scene and he introduces the mark of the beast. Someone had asked, is it possible today that Christians could accidentally receive the mark of the beast because of the technology and microchipping for identification purposes? And of course I explained, no way, that will not happen, because if you're a Christian listening to this, you won't be here, main reason, when the rapture comes, and it's not introduced until right in the middle of the 7-year period. Right after 3.5 years, the first 3.5 years, the mark of the beast is introduced. So the question has come, actually, well, what about Christians then? It's going to be the greatest revival on earth because of the 144,000 witnesses and the 2 main witnesses. What about them? Could they accidentally receive this mark of the beast because it's like a banking transaction? Well, no, that is not possible either. That's where I want to pick up today, and just to clear that up. You see, do you remember last week the Antichrist was killed and then he came back to life, imitating the 2 witnesses? They had been killed and the whole world saw them come back to life and resurrected. And Satan, as we said last week, is the greatest imitator. And he does that, and everyone's going to be in awe that the Antichrist has been killed and comes back to life. And then the introduction of the second beast, the false prophet. He builds a statue to the Antichrist in Jerusalem. Temple has now been desecrated. The Antichrist is sitting on the throne, and he builds this statue which can talk by demons, demonic activity. It talks, not by robotics. It actually talks, carries on conversations. And the whole world will see this, of course, because of satellite and television and all that, internet. And people are going to be kind of scared, going to be kind of freaked out. And so the false prophet, he seizes on this because the statue has said, if you do not worship me, representing the Antichrist, if you do not worship the Antichrist, you must die. Now, in just thinking of that, one could think, well, just keep your mouth shut. Lie low. Don't give your allegiance, but just go about your daily business. Well, the false prophet knows that, of course, so he made certain. Now, here's the purpose of the mark of the beast. He makes certain that nobody can go into hiding and get away without giving their allegiance to the Antichrist. This is why he comes up with the mark of the beast, which he puts onto the right hand or the forehead. I'm going to make mention of that in just a moment. You cannot buy or sell anything. You cannot go to the store and buy bread, milk, eggs. You cannot get petrol, gas for your car. You cannot do anything without this mark of the beast. And you only get it by first giving your allegiance to worship the Antichrist. So you see, Christians will not do that. And this is why they go into such a terrible, terrible difficulty, because no one else can be seen to even help them, to give them some bread on the side, because they will be killed. So it won't be happening. So they can't buy, sell, they can't get food. And if they don't give that allegiance, they will be killed. Many, the biggest revival and the biggest mass killing of Christians ever during this period of time. So that is why the mark of the beast will not be accidentally received by any Christian. They just won't do it. It will be clear cut to give your allegiance to the Antichrist. Now, last week and this morning also, I've mentioned that Satan is the great imitator. Those of you who read my blog on Friday, you will know that I gave mention of the phrase, the right hand, in the Bible. And this is one of those instances. The right hand is mentioned, again, in imitation. The Bible tells us, let me see, Revelation, I think it's Revelation 14. Listen to this. Then I saw the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were the 144,000 witnesses that are going out. They had had a seal, the name of his Father written on their foreheads. Also, I mentioned in the blog Friday that the right hand of God, it always denotes authority, strength, and blessing. So do you see the imitation? This is for purpose, that the Antichrist, the false prophet, has said that the mark of the beast has to be on the right hand and on the forehead. This is Satan's another attempt of of equating himself or even taking over, he feels, the authority of God. So that is why it is specifically done there in great imitation. So I just wanted to start with that this morning to hopefully clear up. No Christian will ever accidentally take the mark of the beast. It is clear cut. Now, as we get into these last 3.5 years of the tribulation, we come across names like Gog, Magog, Meshach, Tubal, Armageddon, and what do they all mean? Then there's the kings of the north and kings of the east and kings of the south. What is all this coming to this battle of Armageddon? And let me begin by saying something about Armageddon. Interestingly, did you know it is only mentioned once in the whole Bible? And that is in Revelation 16:16. Let me just quickly read that to you. 16:16, it says, "And the demonic spirits gather all the rulers and their armies to a place with the Hebrew name Armageddon." That is the only place you will see that in the Bible. Just a note of interest there. Armageddon is a place. There is a mountain in Israel, which in Hebrew is Har Megiddo. Har meaning mount, Megiddo meaning slaughter, and it is called Mount Megiddo to this day. It kind of overlooks the plains of Armageddon, the plains of slaughter. It's 25 miles across one way, 32 miles across the other way. It takes in the southern regions of the Galilee. It goes all the way to the border of the Galilee, takes in all of Nazareth, Mount Tabor, a big plain there. And this is where the battles will mainly take place. We often think when we talk about the Battle of Armageddon, it's just going to be one big one, and then Jesus will come and all will end. But it takes place over 3.5 years. It is not one big battle. There are actually several battles. It's like when we refer to World War II. It wasn't just one big battle. It was many battles that took place over a period of several years, didn't it? And in many places in Europe and in Asia. But it's called World War II. So this is called the Battle or the War of Armageddon, but there are many battles that take place over this 3.5 year period. Now, the Bible talks about, let me just give you some scripture references. Remember, this is not exhaustive. I'm hoping to whet your appetite, and you may delve in yourself. Let me give you some scripture references. Ezekiel chapter 38, very informative. Daniel chapter 11, very informative. Revelation chapter 9. These particularly talk about what we're going to be looking into this morning. That talks about Gog and Magog and Meshach and Tubal and Armageddon. Gog, quite simply, is a person. Gog is the leader of Rosh. Now, Rosh is the old name for what is today Russia. So the leader of Russia, a huge player in all of this. Meshach is the old name for what is today called Moscow. And Tubal, there is a city in Siberia called Tobolsk, probably comes from this. Tubal is the region of Siberia. So we see that Russia, huge in all this. And it talks about Gog is going to gather Magog to begin the march against Israel. Well, what is Magog? It is, it's a series of countries that Russia is going to take in its wake and bring with them. And probably it is what we call as the Stan countries. So the leader of Russia will gather the armies of the Stan countries like Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, probably Azerbaijan, and maybe even Georgia going that way and then coming down into Israel. The Bible refers to this king of the north, and out of interest again, if you look at Jerusalem on a map and go due north right up, you come right to Moscow. So just an interesting note there. So they are going to come in battle, one of the many battles in Armageddon. And then we have the kings of the east coming. Now, this will be China. It talks about Persia, which today is called Iran. And interestingly, this says that these armies are going to be numbered 200 million. 200 million. This is mentioned in Revelation chapter 9. 200 million are going to come across Euphrates, which will be, the Bible says, dried up. The river Euphrates starts in Turkey, comes through parts of Syria, and goes all the way, as we know, through Iraq, Iran, and all the way into Kuwait, all the way over there, which, of course, in that area, Kuwait now was where the Garden of Eden was at one time. That's another whole thing to look at. So these kings of the east in a battle will come again, and they will walk across a dried up Euphrates. Now we know that God miraculously, he parted the Red Sea and the Israelites marched over on dry land. But I think this is going to be a more practical thing happening here. I found it interesting to discover that back in the 60s, the 1960s, that Turkey began to build dams across the Euphrates River. Three of the largest dams are actually in Turkey, in the southeastern and southwestern part of Turkey, and they're used for electricity and to irrigate. There are 22 such dams across the Euphrates, and you know these large ones are capable of just stopping the flow of the Euphrates. So as they're going to join in on the war, the march against Israel, I think it will be a practical measure. And Gog, the leader of Russia, will probably, as it takes Turkey and parts of Syria, will just command, hey, why don't you just dry up the river so China and the rest of them can get over? And indeed, they will do just that. Then we have the kings of the south, that's referred to in Daniel 11. It says it's going to come with Cush. Cush is today Ethiopia. It's also going to come with countries called Put and Libya. Libya is still called Libya. Put are other countries in North Africa. And then Beth Togarmah, which is Asia Minor, parts of Turkey, although that's it is north. It's going to come also with the kings of the south. They're all going to be helping each other. Kings of the north, east, south, they're all going to be coming multiple battles throughout this 3.5 year period. And then it says, now I'm just sharing something personal here. Over the years, I've been looking into this in end times prophecy, in times of the world, of the tribulation period. I came across this Gomer. It mentions Gomer, and every theologian that I have read, they agree that Gomer is Germany. But I just had this thought in my head, how strange. You've got Gog, Russia, you've got China coming, you've got North Africa coming, Turkey coming, and then somewhere way over here, we've got Germany coming. I believed it, but I didn't understand it until I delved a bit further. Just a little interest here. Noah's grandsons, they inhabited most of Russia. And if you look into archaeological evidence, again, I'm leaving that to you to start doing your own digging. There's evidence that Gomer, one of Noah's grandsons, his father was Japheth, that he settled in what is called the Caucasus today in Russia. So I thought, okay, Gomer did go to Russia with his other brothers, the other grandsons of Noah, and they spread out. And he did settle there in South Russia. So why are we referring to we look in the end times as Gomer being Germany? Well, a little more digging. It is so exciting. I've said this before, when you dig into Bible history and to the geography of the time and of long ago and bring it into present day, it just makes the Bible, it just comes alive. And you think, yes, the discoveries are, it's better than getting gold or diamonds. Yes. Well, Gomer had a son, of course, which would be Noah's great-grandson, and his name was Ashkenaz. Now, let me tell you something interesting here. German Jews, especially in World War II, this became a name known around the world. So many German Jews, when they saw what Hitler was doing, and those that understood, they got out while the getting was good, before it was too late for so many. And so many of them settled in the U.S. And in the end, of course, many went to Israel, and they went to other parts of the world, many in Brazil, other places. And they were called, German Jews are even called today, Ashkenazi. And see, Gomer's son was Ashkenaz. They are called Ashkenazi. Geologists or archaeologists believe that Gomer's son, Ashkenaz, he is the one who went and settled near the Danube rivers in Germany. And it is the people, especially the Jews, his descendants, who are called the Ashkenazi. So that just cleared that up for me. And all because of just doing some research and digging. I just so encourage you, when you read the Bible, it's so exciting. But make certain that you've got a Bible history and a Bible cultures book right next to it. Because if you understand so many things in culture and the meanings of things, like even the right hand of God and how Satan is going to try to imitate that with the mark of the beast on the right hand and on the forehead, where the 144 receive that seal on their forehead. He tries to imitate, and it makes it so alive, and our understanding is deepened and broadened. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, those are going to be the different battles. But then, and they're all going to be fought on the plains of Armageddon, the plains of slaughter. Now, let's look at something here. Armageddon, although it will have many battles, there will be the final one. There's going to be such death. If you read in Revelation 9 especially, it talks also about the natural disasters. Speaking of that, It seems each week when I've been sharing with you, I've mentioned the natural disasters that are happening around the world. I mentioned last week things that have happened in parts of Europe. I mentioned those winds, those strong winds in Iowa. And now this week I have yet another thing to mention to you. Hurricane Laura, which struck in the Gulf, particularly Louisiana. And the meteorologists are saying this is the strongest hurricane to hit land in 150 years. Seems every week I talk to you, something else has happened. We're seeing it before our eyes. So the question comes to my mind, and I still leave it with you for consideration. Just wondering, is the earth in labor pains ready to give birth to the tribulation? And if so, be ready, because the rapture will come at any moment. By the way, can I share something else about this rapture? My mind is going on rabbit trails a bit this morning. Jump with me, will you? I feel a little excited today, especially thinking and watching about these labor pains. Maybe, it could be any moment. Do you remember the phrase in Matthew when Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he says, when he's talking about the rapture, he says, no one knows when this event will come like a thief in the night. No one knows when I'm coming. And Jesus said, not even me, only my Father will tell me. Have you ever wondered about that? Well, I've discovered something. Again, Bible culture and history, I really want to emphasize that. In Jewish custom, especially during Bible times, what would happen? A man and a woman would become engaged. Perhaps it was a family arrangement, but they would be engaged. And that was really binding to the marriage, although they had not yet come together as husband and wife. What would happen? They would have the betrothal, the engagement ceremony, and the woman would go back home to begin getting ready with her bridesmaids, and they would get ready things she might need to take to the marriage home. And the groom is gone back to his parents' home, because it was customary for him to build a room or rooms onto his parents' home. That was just customary. And then his wife could help the now getting older mother. That's just the way they did things. And so the groom would happily go back and he would start building the room and preparing. But it wasn't the groom who would say, right, the room's ready, I'm going to get my bride. No, it was the father who was overseeing his son's work. And it was the father who would finally say, son, you've done a good job. Everything's ready. Go and get your bride. And he would go with his groomsmen. The bride wouldn't know when. That was part of the fun. She didn't know when he was coming. Could be in the middle of the night. She had to be ready, had to have her trousseau ready, everything gathered and packed and ready to go at a moment's notice when her groom came to take her home. In John 14:1, it says, don't let your heart be troubled and don't let it be afraid, Jesus says. And then he goes on to tell us why. Why not be troubled and afraid? Because he says, verse 2, in my Father's house are many mansions or many rooms, and I go and prepare a place for you. And now we know what that means. And then the Father's watching him prepare the places, prepare our mansions, and then he's going to say, everything's ready, son. Go and get your bride, which is the church, which is us. And he doesn't know himself. He's waiting for that command from his Father. But the earth, oh, isn't that exciting? The earth is groaning, I believe, in labor pains. You just keep watching with me. We'll see. And we'll be out of here, of course, when the tribulation starts. So I just threw that little rabbit trail info in for you this morning. Now, 200 million are going to march. It's described, there's going to be, John describes it as like comets in the sky. He didn't know in this time what he was seeing. It's probably going to be nuclear things happening, tanks and missiles in the air. What he couldn't describe accurately what he saw. He just did it in his own understanding, like stars shooting across the skies, probably missiles. But you can read all that for yourself. Ezekiel 38, Revelation 9, and after that. And you can delve in and get a better picture yourself and really look there. But then the final battle, which we generally refer to as Armageddon, which, as we know, is over 3.5 years, many battles, but the final, the crescendo, if you will, it will be so bad from all the fighting. It tells us also in Revelation 9 that blood from all the dead bodies will be so deep it comes up to the bridle of a horse. And not only this, the Bible tells us 180 miles long, nearly the whole length of Israel. We can't believe it. We can't imagine it. We can believe it. We can hardly imagine such a thing. Do you see why the tribulation period is the worst war that the world will have ever seen? And thankfully, that will ever see again. So all this happening, death everywhere, blood everywhere, the missiles, the fighting in the air and on the ground, the pain, terrible. But then, wonderfully, we have Revelation 19 and verse 11. Listen to this. At the height of this crescendo of awfulness in this battle, this final battle of Armageddon, verse 11, Revelation 19, and the vision that John saw was this. Then I saw heaven opened, and a white horse was standing there. Its rider was named Faithful and True, for he judges fairly, and he wages a righteous war. His eyes were like flames of fire, and on his head were many crowns. We know who this is. A name was written on him that no one understood except himself. He wore a robe dipped in blood, and his title was the Word of God. The armies of heaven, they dressed in the finest of pure white linen. They followed him on white horses also. From his mouth came a sharp sword to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with an iron rod. He will release the fierce wrath of God the Almighty like juice flowing from a winepress. On his robe, at his thigh, was written this title, King of all kings and Lord of all lords. Wow, what a sight that will be for those Christians who have made it. They're still living. Oh, what a sight. And what terror for those who see it coming who do not know him and perhaps begin to realize, gulp, he's real. Gulp. Verse 17, Revelation 19 says, Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, shouting to the vultures flying high in the sky, Come, gather together for the great banquet of God. Oh, come and eat the flesh of the kings and the generals and the warriors, of the horses and the riders, and of all humanity, both free and slave, small and great, all those that have dead that made that blood so high, up to a horse's bridle, a bridle 180 miles long, and the vultures will be invited, called from around the earth, it says, to feast. Oh, now listen to this. Then I saw the beast, yes, the beast, and the kings of the world, and their armies gathered together to fight against the one sitting on the horse and his army. I mean, can you even believe it? Even then, they see him coming in great might with armies in the air. Even then, they're going to try to fight back. But listen what happens, verse 20 of Revelation 19. And the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who did miracles on behalf of the beast, miracles that deceived all who had accepted the mark of the beast and who worshipped his statue. Both the beast and the false prophet were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. They actually go to hell before Satan. Their entire army was killed by the sharp sword that came out of the mouth of Jesus, the one riding on the white horse. And the vultures were gorging themselves continually on the dead bodies. Now listen to this. Revelation 20. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven with the key to the bottomless pit, not the fire, the bottomless pit, and a heavy chain. Verse 2. He seized the dragon, Satan, says that old serpent Satan, and bound him in chains, listen to this, for 1,000 years. You know, when Jesus comes at this time and he slaughters all the enemies, he sets up what we refer to, it is the millennial kingdom, millennial meaning 1,000, 1,000 years reign, where there'll be unprecedented peace on the earth. But listen to this. Satan is bound in chains for 1,000 years. Okay. The angel threw him into the bottomless pit, which he then shut and locked. So Satan could not deceive the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were finished. And after that, he would be released for a little while. Now, the first time I ever saw that, it was like a major scratching my head moment, like, well, why would God do that? Why, if I had been God, he'd be down there with the Antichrist and the false prophet in that fiery pit forever. And yet he's only bound in a bottomless pit, bound, can't get out for 1,000 years, and then he is loosed for a time. Why? We know God does all things perfectly and righteously. Why did this happen? So I will end by saying, stay tuned. Next week, we're going to delve into the why is Satan loosed at the end of the millennium, but we're going to be talking about the millennium period next week when Jesus takes his place on the throne of David in Jerusalem. And when the world is in peace like we have never known for 1,000 years, what will we be doing during that time, you and I? What's going to be taking place among the nations at that time during the millennial reign of Christ? What exactly happens? And why on earth at the end of it is Satan loosed again? We'll look at that next week. I hope this has been a blessing to you. I hope it has encouraged you to want to dive in, to really discover even more yourself, more of the details. I hope this has been a good overview for you. There's a terrible time coming. For those of us watching are Christians, we won't be here. Wow. But there's a terrible time coming. That's why we so want to tell those we know who do not yet know Jesus what to expect. If anything, if they don't receive Jesus before the rapture, we will have planted a seed in their mind so that when it happens, they'll say, oh, all these people have disappeared. Oh, Vicky was right. You were right. Oh, they told me this was happening. Oh, no. Maybe that will be what turns them to Jesus Christ, to get that strength they need to face the going through the tribulation. They may well be killed, very possible, but they will have that stamina, a stamina that Jesus will give them. And maybe because you and I planted a seed in their mind, how important to come to know Jesus Christ. You have a blessed week. Next week we look at the millennium. Until then, dive in, be blessed. Until next time.